The news hit the financial world like a thunderclap. The Iraqi dinar, long considered a dormant currency that many investors had written off years ago, suddenly surged in value. Screens across trading floors lit up with the same numbers that previously would have seemed impossible, sending waves of excitement and disbelief rippling through investor communities. For decades, the dinar had been dismissed as a risky, stagnant asset, a relic of political instability and economic uncertainty. Stories of its stagnation and failure had become almost legendary, whispered warnings passed among cautious investors, tales of opportunities lost and fortunes that never materialized. But now, those old narratives seemed on the verge of being rewritten. The market chatter started subtly at first, in obscure online forums where currency enthusiasts and niche traders traded tips, predictions, and inside speculation. Someone posted screenshots of local Baghdad exchange rates showing a sudden, sharp rise. Others dismissed it as a temporary anomaly, a glitch in the system. But as hours passed, more evidence emerged. Financial analysts began to tweet cautiously about unusual movements, and small media outlets picked up the story, framing it as a potential turning point for Iraq's economy. Slowly, the whispers grew into a roar, reaching mainstream headlines and drawing the attention of investors worldwide. Among the investors watching the dinar, emotions were a tangled mix of exhilaration and fear. On one hand, there was the undeniable thrill of witnessing a currency, long considered stagnant, suddenly move upward. For those who had quietly held small amounts of dinar for years, the numbers on their screens promised the possibility of life-changing gains. On the other hand, skepticism lingered like a shadow. Many wondered if this surge was sustainable, or if it was just the first tremor before a collapse. Rumors of government revaluation plans and strategic economic initiatives fueled the frenzy, but the uncertainty only made the excitement sharper. Every investor, from the casual hobbyist to the seasoned trader, faced the same urgent question: was this the beginning of a historic boom, or merely a mirage that would vanish before they could act? In Baghdad, the atmosphere was electric. Local traders, who had spent years operating in the shadow of international scrutiny and economic instability, suddenly found themselves in the spotlight. Exchange offices reported long lines of citizens eager to trade, each hoping to secure a piece of what many began to believe was a historic opportunity. It was no longer a niche story or a speculative discussion among forum members. It was a full-blown economic event unfolding in real time. News outlets broadcast live from exchange offices, showing crowds of people checking rates on their phones, murmuring in excited anticipation, and clenching bundles of cash with trembling hands. The city itself seemed to pulse with a renewed sense of hope and urgency, the streets vibrating with the energy of possibility. Online, the story took on a life of its own. Social media platforms were flooded with screenshots of soaring rates, charts, and predictive calculations. Influencers and self-styled financial gurus began posting their analyses, some cautious, some wildly optimistic. Forums became battlegrounds of opinion. Some users insisted that the dinar's rise was the first sign of a long-awaited revaluation that could rival the world's top currencies, while others warned of manipulation and short-lived spikes designed to trap unsuspecting investors. Despite the differing perspectives, one sentiment united the community: nobody wanted to be left behind. Every refresh of a trading app or currency converter was a heartbeat of anticipation, a mix of hope, fear, and adrenaline that few financial events ever matched. Internationally, the story began to attract attention in ways that seemed almost surreal. Analysts in London, New York, and Tokyo started issuing briefings about the sudden surge, framing it as a potential turning point not just for the Iraqi economy, but for global currency markets. Investment firms sent alerts to their clients, some urging caution while others hinted at unprecedented opportunities. Financial news channels interrupted regular programming to discuss the dinar's rise, comparing it to historic currency booms and collapses from the past. Viewers around the world, many of whom had only a passing interest in Middle Eastern economics, suddenly found themselves drawn into the drama. Comments sections and chat rooms overflowed with speculation, with people sharing anecdotes about friends and family who had invested years ago, pondering what this new surge meant for them. The story had become more than just numbers on a screen. It had become a shared experience, a global moment of collective curiosity and anxiety. For some individuals, the rise of the dinar was more than just an investment opportunity. It was a personal story. Small investors who had held onto the currency through years of stagnation felt a rush of vindication. They remembered the doubts of friends, the warnings of skeptics, and the long, quiet wait as their investment seemed frozen in time. Now, watching the numbers climb, there was a tangible sense of reward, a validation that their patience might finally pay off. On the other hand, new investors approached cautiously, knowing that while opportunity could translate into profit, missteps could result in significant losses. The balance between risk and reward had never felt more immediate, more intense. Every decision to buy, hold, or sell was charged with emotion, magnified by the scale of the sudden surge. Amid the excitement, questions about sustainability and legitimacy loomed large. Analysts reminded the world that while the dinar had shown an impressive spike, structural economic challenges remained. The currency was still largely non-convertible on global Forex markets, and political instability could quickly undermine investor confidence. Yet for many, the excitement outweighed caution, the fear of missing out, the possibility that this surge was the beginning of something historic, drove people to act quickly. Social media amplified every success story, every "I made a fortune" post, further fueling the frenzy. The narrative was no longer just about the currency itself. It was about being part of a historic moment, of witnessing and participating in a global economic phenomenon as it unfolded. By the end of the first day, the surge had transformed from a technical anomaly into a story of human anticipation, risk, and opportunity. Investors, traders, and ordinary citizens alike were all captivated, bound together by the shared experience of witnessing a currency rise from obscurity to the center of global attention. Whether the dinar would ultimately become the next top currency remained uncertain, but one truth was undeniable. The Iraqi dinar had captured the imagination of the world, turning speculation into excitement, curiosity into frenzy, and numbers on a screen into a story of possibility that no one wanted to miss. The excitement around the Iraqi dinar surge had quickly spread from financial news outlets to the streets of Baghdad, where the story was no longer just a headline, but a tangible, lived experience. Exchange offices that had once seen quiet, predictable traffic were now bustling with activity. Citizens, many of whom had never considered investing in foreign currency before, were lining up in anticipation, clutching bundles of cash and smartphones. The city seemed electrified, as if the very streets were humming with a sense of historic significance. Everyone felt the urgency of the moment. To act slowly was to risk missing out, to act recklessly was to risk everything. In every corner of Baghdad, from the high-rise office buildings to the narrow market alleys, the conversation revolved around the dinar, its surge, and the possibility of unprecedented wealth. Local traders, who had spent years navigating a fragile economy, suddenly found themselves at the center of a global spectacle. They were no longer just facilitating routine transactions. They were participants in a historic event with international ramifications. The central bank's recent recognition of all dinar denominations had added legitimacy to the surge, fueling speculation that a revaluation might be imminent. News reporters stationed outside exchange offices captured the scenes in real time, people checking their rates repeatedly, comparing their holdings with the numbers flashing across their apps, and whispering excitedly about the potential for financial transformation. There was a palpable tension in the air, a mix of optimism and anxiety, as the crowd collectively wondered if they were witnessing the start of something extraordinary. Online, the frenzy took on an entirely new dimension. Social media platforms were ablaze with posts, videos, and memes about the dinar. Influencers and Claimed financial experts flooded the internet with predictions, analyses, and hot tips on how to maximize gains. Forums and discussion boards became arenas of debate. Some users warned that the surge could be manipulated by insiders or short-lived spikes, while others insisted this was the beginning of a long-awaited economic revolution. Amid the cacophony of opinions, one sentiment remained universal: nobody wanted to be left behind. Every post and comment seemed to amplify the fear of missing out, creating a sense of urgency that was almost contagious. Even those who had never considered investing found themselves drawn in, their curiosity fueled by the stories of small fortunes being made in real time. Internationally, the story began to dominate financial conversations. Analysts in London, New York, Dubai, and Tokyo started scrutinizing the dinar's sudden climb. Television networks interrupted regular programming to discuss the surge, while online financial platforms issued alerts and briefings. Investors who had once dismissed the currency as irrelevant now found themselves researching, analyzing, and recalculating strategies. The narrative was no longer localized; it had become a global phenomenon. Discussions about the Iraqi dinar appeared alongside major world events on social media, in news apps, and even in casual conversations in cafes and offices across the globe. The surge had become more than a financial development. It had become a shared human experience, connecting people across continents through a collective sense of excitement, uncertainty, and possibility. For individual investors, the surge was deeply personal. Many who had quietly held dinar for years were suddenly vindicated. They remembered the skepticism of friends and family, the warnings from advisors, and the long, quiet periods of waiting. Now, watching the numbers climb in real time, there was a tangible sense of reward and validation. These modest holders of the dinar suddenly felt part of a larger story, participants in an event that might be remembered for decades. New investors, on the other hand, approached with caution. They recognized the potential rewards but were acutely aware of the risks. The delicate balance between fear and hope made every decision feel charged with consequence. Buy too soon and risk a sudden drop. Wait too long and miss a historic opportunity. The tension was almost cinematic, a high-stakes drama unfolding in real time across Baghdad, across Iraq, and across the globe. Meanwhile, rumors of international interest only added to the frenzy. Whispers circulated that investors from Europe and Asia were moving large sums of money into dinar, seeking to capitalize on the surge before it became mainstream knowledge. Analysts speculated about potential government interventions, economic reforms, and even geopolitical developments that could affect the currency's trajectory. These discussions created a perfect storm of anticipation, uncertainty, and speculation. Every new piece of information, whether a tweet, a news clip, or a report from the central bank, sent ripples through the market, influencing decisions and fueling the sense that something historic was unfolding. The human stories behind the surge were equally compelling. Ordinary citizens who had long struggled in a fragile economy now found themselves dreaming bigger. There were tales of small investors calculating potential gains, imagining how life might change if the dinar's value continued to climb. There were also stories of cautionary measures, parents teaching children about the importance of careful investment, small business owners weighing risks against potential rewards, and community sharing strategies to avoid scams and fraud. The surge was not just a financial event. It was a social one, reshaping perceptions, inspiring hope, and challenging assumptions about what was possible. As the day wore on, the sense of immediacy intensified. Traders refreshed their apps constantly, comparing rates and monitoring movements. Exchange offices reported unprecedented traffic, while people used smartphones to stay connected with global market updates. The city became a living, breathing reflection of the market itself, restless, reactive, and charged with anticipation. Conversations shifted from speculation about future gains to the practical realities of navigating this sudden surge, from strategies for safe investment to stories of friends who had already acted. The emotional stakes were as high as the financial ones, and every heartbeat seemed synchronized with the numbers on the screen. By evening, the story had fully transcended its financial roots. It was no longer just about the dinar or its value. It was about human ambition, curiosity, and the desire to seize opportunity. The surge had become a narrative, a shared experience, a global event that connected investors, citizens, and casual observers alike. Social media, local news, and international headlines all told the same story. Something remarkable was happening, something that could redefine the way people viewed the Iraqi dinar. Everyone knew that the coming days would be crucial. Would the surge continue, stabilizing into long-term growth, or would it falter under the weight of uncertainty and speculation? The answers were still unknown, but one thing was clear: Baghdad and the world would never look at the dinar the same way again. By the time the third day of the Iraqi dinar surge arrived, the story had escalated from a regional phenomenon to a global spectacle. The initial excitement had transformed into a mixture of strategic calculation, cautious optimism, and feverish speculation. Across Baghdad, people moved through the streets with a sense of purpose that felt almost tangible, clutching currency, checking rates on smartphones, and exchanging hurried whispers with friends and strangers alike. The dinar, long dismissed as a stagnant currency of limited relevance, had become the focal point of conversations in cafes, offices, and marketplaces. Everywhere, the sentiment was the same. This was not merely a moment, it was history in the making, and no one wanted to be left behind. The surge had drawn the attention of international media, turning Baghdad into a symbol of possibility and risk. Journalists from major news networks were stationed outside exchange offices, broadcasting live footage of the crowds and conducting interviews with excited citizens. Their cameras captured the nervous energy of small traders who had been operating quietly for years, now suddenly elevated to the spotlight of global attention. Analysts, economists, and financial commentators weighed in, dissecting the surge with charts, graphs, and long-winded explanations of the macroeconomic factors at play. Yet for all the numbers and data, the story's heart remained human. The excitement, the hope, and the fear that pulsed through every individual who had invested even a fraction of their savings in the dinar. Social media had become a battleground of information and speculation. Posts, videos, and live streams spread like wildfire, often outpacing official news channels in reach and immediacy. Users shared screenshots of their gains, discussed potential future revaluations, and offered advice. Some legitimate, some speculative, and some deliberately misleading. The frenzy created a digital echo chamber where every new post amplified the sense of urgency. Hashtags related to the dinar began trending worldwide, linking people across continents who were united by curiosity, hope, or sheer fear of missing out. Even those who had never invested in foreign currency found themselves swept into the conversation, captivated by the narrative of a currency rising from obscurity to potential prominence. In Baghdad, the human stories were compelling. Families gathered around smartphones and televisions, calculating what the dinar surge could mean for their future. Parents discussed the best ways to protect their investments, young professionals debated whether to sell or hold, and friends exchanged tips on safe trading platforms. Ordinary people, who had long faced economic uncertainty, now found themselves imagining possibilities they had previously considered out of reach. Conversations shifted from mundane daily concerns to strategy, speculation, and dreams of financial transformation. Every small gain was celebrated, every rumor dissected, and every fluctuation in the exchange rate sparked a flurry of activity both online and offline. The central bank's role in the surge became a focal point of discussion. Rumors of official support for revaluation and measures to stabilize the currency added a layer of legitimacy, though analysts cautioned that political instability and economic challenges could still disrupt the trajectory. This tension between optimism and caution heightened the stakes, creating a sense of high drama that few financial events ever matched. Investors acted with both urgency and care, acutely aware that timing could determine whether this opportunity resulted in transformative gains or devastating losses. Each decision, whether to buy more, sell some, or wait, was fraught with the weight of uncertainty. international investors began moving in cautiously but decisively. The story of the dinar had reached hedge funds, trading firms, and wealthy individuals worldwide. Analysts issued reports detailing the potential for growth, the risks involved, and scenarios in which the currency could stabilize at higher values. The ripple effect was immediate. Currencies in neighboring markets saw minor fluctuations, while international trading platforms experienced surges in dinar-related activity. The narrative had expanded from a local surge to a global conversation about opportunity, strategy, and risk. Economic newsletters and financial blogs dissected the events, blending analysis with cautionary tales of past booms and busts in other markets. Amid the financial calculations, the emotional stakes were equally high. Ordinary citizens who had held dinar for years now felt a profound sense of validation, their patience and quiet optimism finally rewarded. New investors navigated the steep learning curve of currency speculation, learning to weigh risk, timing, and market sentiment. Families discussed budgets in ways they had never done before, considering how gains from the dinar could affect education, housing, and life plans. Communities debated collective strategies to protect themselves from fraud, scams, and sudden market swings. The surge had transcended mere numbers. It had become a story of human ambition, hope, and resilience. The media amplified every success story. Videos of individuals claiming modest gains that had turned into life-changing sums circulated rapidly. These stories fueled the collective imagination, creating a sense of momentum that was both exhilarating and perilous. Financial advisors warned against overexcitement, emphasizing the importance of measured decision-making, yet the allure of historic returns kept fear and caution at bay for many. In a sense, the dinar had become a mirror reflecting both ambition and caution, excitement and restraint, hope and fear. The narrative was no longer just about a currency. It was about human behavior under extraordinary circumstances. As night fell on the third day, the energy in Baghdad and across global networks remained electric. Streets were quieter than during the day, but the online chatter showed no signs of slowing. Investors and casual observers alike continued to monitor rates, refresh apps, and analyze news updates. The surge had become part of the daily rhythm of life, a backdrop to conversation, decision-making, and imagination. Even those who had been skeptical at first were now watching with bated breath, their curiosity mingling with the hope that this could be a rare once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The final hours of this scene were marked by reflection as much as speculation. People recounted the past, considering how long the dinar had been overlooked, dismissed, and undervalued. They compared today's surge to historical moments of economic transformation, recognizing both the risks and the extraordinary potential. Analysts cautioned about volatility and advised careful planning, but the excitement was unstoppable. The dinar, once a quiet, overlooked currency, had captured the attention of the world. It had become a symbol of opportunity, resilience, and the unpredictability of financial markets. By the end of the day, it was clear that the Iraqi dinar surge was more than just an economic event. It was a narrative that had united people globally in anticipation, analysis, and excitement. Traders, investors, citizens, and curious observers had all become part of the story, connected by the shared experience of witnessing a currency rise from obscurity to the center of attention. Whether the dinar would ultimately cement itself as a top currency or settle back into relative stability was still uncertain, but the impact of these days was undeniable. For the people involved, the surge had already transformed perspectives, inspired dreams, and created a sense of shared history. The world had watched, participated, and been captivated, and the Iraqi dinar had claimed its place in the collective imagination as a currency that dared to defy expectations.